Speaking for the trees, no matter where they're from. The podcast.
So for this episode of Speaking for the Trees, no matter where they're from, the podcast, I'm joined by a co-host today, Nikki Hill. And today our guest is Nikos Giannakis.
Giannakis. That's right.
Nikos Giannakis. Okay, great. Thank you very much for your patience with that. So I was just hoping that perhaps we could start. Nikos, you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. And I think you're with the University of Leeds, but you're in Greece. So just give us a little a background about yourself.
Yes, okay. So I studied biology. It was my first degree here in Greece, in Athens, in the University of Athens. And I can say it was almost by mistake. I wasn't sure at the time. In those days in Greece, we didn't really know what exactly ecology is all about. It wasn't a widespread kind of profession or information and so on. It was mainly engineers and lawyers and doctors and so on. So I was meant to become an architect, but I didn't make the exams. So I became a biologist. And through studying biology, I became very interested, of course, in ecology. And then I wanted to do some postgraduate studies. And I found this course in Leeds, which was environmental pollution control. And at the time, I found very interesting because it had a lot of engineering involved and so on. It was a multidisciplinary course, so we would learn about various issues of pollution and dealing with it. And it was quite interesting for a year. And then I wanted to stay on in Leeds and found some interesting people in a different department, in the department of it was called at the time agricultural chemistry. I mean, now it sounds very heavy nowadays with all these regenerative practices that are on the go, hoping to someday take over the world. And anyway, so I did a PhD on soil biology or microbiology, interactions of arbuscular fungi, mycorrhizal arbuscular fungi, which are at the time were called vesicular arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. Actually, it was in old days of the 80s. And that was an exciting experience also. And then I stopped, had to come back to Greece because here in Greece, we also have our national service kind of commitments. So I had to really come back in 1990. And then I joined, I sort of joined the professional world and stopped research and had to go and work. It wasn't easy to find a place in a university here in Greece. So anyway, I was led away from the whole of soil biology and microbiology and became an environmental consultant. And for years, we did a lot of impact assessments, those believed to be environmental studies to protect the environment, which in effect turn out that they sort of try to find ways for all the projects and investments to sort of tackle the environmental regulations and find their way through. But we did a decent job, and we were always sort of trying to do as best we can with the environmental regulations that would be proposed. And we had a lot of, at the time, it was all the public sector mainly. We were involved in the public sector. And eventually we decided to leave Athens. And that was really a very sort of crucial decision as far as our philosophy and general sort of policy and involvement with the environment was concerned. That was in two different phases anyway. To carry a long story short, we are in Prespa. We've been living in Prespa, which is a national park up in the northwest of Greece, ever since 2009 now. My wife is an architect. She's involved in, she sort of works mainly with restoration of old buildings, which are made of stone or mud. And she has sort of become an expert, you may say, with natural sort of equipment and bricks and so on, natural elements of building. So we've been here for almost 15 years. And I must say that coming and living within nature changes the way that you look at things dramatically. We've become, I was a volunteer, I was the chairman of the the management body of the National Park of Prespa for 7 years. And I have become really we have now we've become very much involved in activism, and we've seen how things are going. It's dramatic. It's like you described. For example, Thacker Pass is a very good example. Don't need to go into the details if you don't want, but it is really, really very bad here in Western Macedonia where we live for several reasons. I might come to that later if you like. And it's we were doing our best to do whatever we can for nature, for trees, for all the things that people don't seem to realize how important they are. Anyway,
right.
Through our professional work and through our extra time, the time that we have available.
I think that one thing that's not understood very well right now, just to the general public in the United States and perhaps also in Europe, you can tell us now, is that there's this effort to move away from fossil fuels. The concern is about carbon emissions, and then move to other energy sources such as solar, wind, water. This also involves mining lithium for batteries for electric cars and all that. And so we're being sort of sold on something that's supposed to be an environmental solution, but which itself has tremendous environmental impacts. So, for example, we can say that sunlight or wind is a renewable resource and that it's being constantly produced. However, the mechanisms for capturing that energy, for transporting that energy, all the different things that have to happen to make that infrastructure are themselves very environmentally destructive. And that's the part of the story that's being left out, and in some cases, what's happening now is that there are places that had managed to escape being, quote, developed up till now, but now they're under threat. So it sounds like that's a similar situation as to what's happening in Europe?
Yeah, that's exactly what is happening in Europe, and very similar. And in effect, we always think that here in Greece in particular, we are not so well organized as far as planning for land use is concerned, and for planning for switching from one mode to the other, from fossil fuels to some other kind of energy production and so on. But in effect, what happens is that Europe is also very similar, and most of the policies come from the European community, which we are part of course. With the Ukraine and Russian kind of war, things have become really worse because they're hastening the change to renewables so that we may become independent, which I don't see how it will be. But anyway, this is the kind of idea that is prevailing, so that we're energy independent, and it is exactly similar or the same as to what is happening in the States, because I have sort of in the couple of years that have gone now, or perhaps 3 years it's been, I've been studying and researching and listening to, because I listen a lot because I don't have very much time to read so much, unfortunately. I do read, but listening is easy because it's better. Sometimes, you can do it while you're doing something else, which doesn't require your attention. So it's nice to listen, I think, and it's very good. I'm very happy that you're actually going on a new podcasting period, and there's a lot of interesting research going on, and I think that yes, we are having similar problems. It's crazy. You cannot believe the places that they are taking and destroying. And right now we're mainly dealing with infrastructure for energy production of all sorts here in Greece. But there have been some efforts there have been some applications for mining of metals as well, of minerals as well here, but they have been pushed back because people are very sort of sensitive about, particularly about extraction of this sort. And there's a lot of, there's more sort of opposition against mining than there is for the infrastructure itself. But I'm sure that we will have more and more pressure for mining because we do have minerals, even in protected areas like the one we live in here, in the national park. And it's crazy, you know, because it's destruction, it's land use, complete ruining land uses. And the funny thing also is that it's against climate mitigation, because if you have, I don't know if you reached out to that the fact that you have land use is the other leg. Have you come across Millán Millán, the Spanish profound climatologist scientist who has been left out of the main narrative?
No.
Do you know him?
No, I don't.
He's a very interesting guy. He's old now. He's 84, but he's very, very active, and he has taken part in many conferences, and he speaks out a lot. Once upon a time, his narrative, his work was very profound. He found he has extremely important evidence as to what happens with climate, and it's the one leg is supposed to be the greenhouse effect.
Mm-hmm.
But the greenhouse effect is of lesser importance in a way, because it's what happens with land use that determines what the greenhouse effect will do, how the greenhouse effect reacts. For example, if we managed to cool the surface of our Earth, by not covering everything with artificial land uses, the Earth would sort of radiate coolness. So the greenhouse effect would have no effect, if you see what I mean. There's a lot of people working on that. Millán is one of them. I can perhaps introduce you to some of the work. There's this guy, Rob Lewis, a poet.
I know him.
American. Do you know him? He's
Yeah,
written a lot. He's written a three-part. He's written a three. He's a very nice guy. I haven't met him, but I'm really fond of him, and I would love to meet him one day. And he's written a three-part story in his Substack about Millán. So it's very interesting, because it's very simple, and it describes the history of why the other leg of climate change and dealing with climate change was left out. And now the IPCC is concentrated on a narrative that these people, the research that they've done, believe that it's not going to work anyway. So it's not the way to deal. It's a very reductionist view to only go for CO2. Yeah. I mean, we've started from a human activity, as you describe it very nicely, ruining a lot of its land uses, changing everything. Then we've gone into, that's what they say. Then we've gone into human activity concerning only the fossil fuel burning. Mm-hmm. And from there, we've taken out only the CO2, which is produced by fossil fuel burning. And we're trying to deal with a very intricate and very complex situation only by dealing with the CO2. Of all the greenhouse effect, we've chosen to deal with CO2. So this shows the craziness. Mm-hmm. And it's all related, of course, with what you're describing. It shows us how important nature is, because we need to follow the rules that nature sets in order to deal with what the crises, which are multi-crises that we're dealing in right now. And that the ecological crisis is connected 100% related to climate crisis. Climate crisis is not something that just came from the skies.
No. I don't understand when people say fight climate change. I'm like, what do you mean fight climate change? Like, it's an expression of the different relationships that are going on. And it's like the hijacking of the environmental movement with the carbon conversation is like just the epitome of this oversimplification that's gotten us in trouble. It's like cut us off from being in relation with the rest of the natural world. Like, it's kind of funny that we still have to remind ourselves that nature is important. Like, that's kind of weird, you know? There's all kinds of layers in that, but it's like somehow we keep forgetting, and we don't trust that all of those relationships together is what makes a life possible here. You can't streamline it, you know? You can't pull out carbon. You can't over channelize all of the streams. You can't dam them all and expect it to function the same. It's going to function differently, you know? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, bringing up the cooling of the earth. This has been coming up in research I've been doing for like the fire mitigation stuff, because people are really afraid of the big fires. And there's also other conversation going on about how to live with fire, and you know, there's some nuance coming in. But the fire mitigation is like these huge projects that take out a lot of vegetation because it's all considered fuel, you know. But it's like there's also another big part of the conversation that's talking about, if you remove all of that vegetation, you're not shading the soil anymore. You end up drying it out more, and then the winds come through, and it's like wind tunnels, you know. So it's like, and it seems like it's hard. People are like afraid to consider the whole thing, you know. They want to have one thing to hang it on so that we have an answer. And I think a part of that is like this deep anxiety. And maybe a part of that deep anxiety is that we don't feel like we belong here. Like, we don't actually feel that in our bodies, you know, that we belong here, that the world takes care of us, that it's a reciprocal thing, you know. Like, more and more, you know, from being involved in land-based attention and practices for 18 years of my life, that part comes up strong, that it's like, what is it in us, this separation, that causes us to not be able to work with the natural world for our solutions, you know? Like, I went to school for environmental science in the early 2000s, and I remember the carbon trading conversation was brand new when I was in there. We were just talking about it as a theoretical thing in environmental economics classes, and talking about ways it made sense, ways it didn't make any sense at all. And now it's like such a big part of the conversation, and it doesn't have a basis in reality of there being any less carbon put into the atmosphere, because you can just trade it and say that you're good. Like, you created all this carbon, but you bought this forest over here, kicked out all of the indigenous folks, and that's your carbon reserve. So you can continue doing your thing. And it's just like, we have to start thinking about it as a holistic relationship, because that's the only solution. It's like a big universal ask in our existence here to heal at all levels, to consider them all at the same time. And we're capable of doing that, you know, not maybe from a linear, rational, or so-called rational way of existing, but like, yeah. And yeah, you're talking about infrastructure over there, and I do vegetation consultation for land management agencies, and with the utility world, you know, I teach them plant ID and how to look at landscapes and what habitat means and what it can look like and stuff like that. And there's 9 million acres of right-of-ways in North America. That's a lot of land under the infrastructure just to move energy around. And I heard a quote about how many more miles of like utility lines are needed just for the green energy we've already started to make. It's 10,000 miles of wires that are needed. Like, these things don't come without an extra addition of infrastructure beyond what we already have. You can't just use the same infrastructure. especially when you're putting in your sources, your solar arrays in the middle of nowhere. That means that whole distance between the middle of nowhere and wherever people want to use the electricity, you need lines and wires and bulldozers, you know. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, there's some kind of thing, some kind of fantasy lurking in the background that we can have no effect, you know, that we can live the way we're living, and that this new renewable energy or the internet is like an ether that doesn't have a physical representation. But it's not true. Everything has a physical representation. Like I saw this solar array being built by where I grew up in Colorado. And I watched it being built over a couple of years, and ended up being quite a large solar array on the side of the highway. And was talking to my dad about it, and it came out that it was for mining Bitcoin. It was a green energy, you know, set up so that they could mine Bitcoin for make-believe money. You know, that's like, oh, these things they all have a physical reality still, you know. But I think that part gets forgotten, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's because too many people are in cities and they don't see outside.
Yeah.
And when they do go outside, they go to all these marvelous places that are specially chosen for them to have a nice weekend or some holiday.
Yeah.
So they don't actually see all this infrastructure that you know, if you actually go and see what is going on, perhaps you become more sensitized of the environment around you.
Yeah.
But I think the climate is here has changed. I mean, we're having all these climate crises, you know, these extreme weather phenomena and so on. And all these, I mean, Millán explains it very well how it happens globally, not just locally, but from a local level to a global level to a European to so on. And it's happening and it's affecting people's lives.
Yeah.
We've been doing this. We're involved in this study now, this mega project in Greece, which is to do with protected areas. I don't know if you know that here in Europe, we have this protected areas network, the Natura 2000, it's called.
Have not heard of that.
Which means that we have areas of nature conservation interest, very, very important for life, natural life. And these are networked in a way within Europe. So they form this European network of protected areas. So there may be ecological corridors that connect them if it's needed. There might be some buffer zones around them, but it's basically some very important areas like the one we are here now with the wetlands. One of the obligations of our country, of any European country to the European community, is to actually have management plans for these areas. You also have management plans for your parks or whatever, I guess, in the States. And they are sort of conservation related. And conservation has two separate axes. It's the protection sort of section and the management section. The one where you have management measures and protection measures. Protection measures is land use. What kind of land use may you have in certain zones within each protected area? And the management measures they refer to the whole of the area, the site, the protected site. And there may be things like particular kind of grazing, so as to create habitats, to conserve certain habitats. It may be management of water, surface water, groundwater, particular measures which are sort of like recipes to the management authorities as to what they should do for the next 5 years. And then after 5 years, they are sort of updated and life goes on. But the more the land use commitments, they become very strict legislation, very strong legislation, Greek legislation, which is a presidential decree. Within a presidential decree, all the land use and the zones within a protected area are designated. I don't know if that is at all clear.
You mean which you mean a national president or president of the EU, or when you say president?
The president of Greece.
Oh, okay. So in Greece
we,
only.
we are committed. We must, each country must do something to manage effectively their protected areas.
Right.
But what exactly it is that we do has to do with Greek policies and legislations, and not necessarily the European community doesn't sort of interfere unless we do everything wrong and nothing is protected. Like what happens now is because all this work took a long time to start to be operated, the studies to be underway. Greece is paying a fine to Europe now because it should have done this work quite a long time ago. But at long last, we've started. It's taking a very long time because it doesn't make the government very happy. When you don't exactly have a plan for your land uses, you can sort of guide things differently. Anything can happen. And of course, even we are 11 different groups of consultants, offices that are working on 11 different areas within Greece at the same time with the same guidelines. We are working in for Western Macedonian protected areas, my group. And for one more time, I was asking myself, because we need to present all this work and persuade, influence the way people think and guide them to accept proposals that may be changing their lifestyles that they know, their business as usual sort of prototypes. I started thinking, what do you tell people? Why is biodiversity important for their lives? Because the problem is that humans have been outside the ecosystems. Isn't that the case? Isn't that an issue? We think that it's the ecosystems and we are outside and we try to have the least possible impact and so on, whereas we could be working within the ecosystems, producing excellent products, working on the land, not just have ecosystems as museums, but be within them, under certain ways. Of course, you cannot not extracting for lithium, but using the land like the old civilizations used to do that. The local people, and so this is how I got into this very interesting story of what happens with why is it important that we look at the ecology, and why is it important that we protect and regenerate, and how do we regenerate, and for what reason, and how are all things, and then all things become connected. And you see that even the fact that people are leaving, I think that happens perhaps in the States also in certain areas. People are leaving the countryside and going to the cities here in Greece. We have a big problem. There's no people to work on the land anymore. And places are becoming abandoned. The villages are becoming very, very, most of the people are old, and then they go and there's nothing left behind. Young people are lacking. All these things. Education. There's not enough education. There's not proper education to educate people how to carry on. What kind of profession they should lead. Why is it better for young people to go, to Germany perhaps, or go to the cities in Greece and live in the city for a small wage under great difficulty, instead of staying where they came from and do, work with the land, cultivate, practice regenerative agriculture or stock breeding or whatever. And be rich in not only money-wise, but also in their feelings, and be happy. These are things that, but it's very difficult. How can people know and understand if they've been taught a completely different narrative all their lives.
Mhm.
This is the difficulty that we're facing here. And of course, our proposals are not very popular with the central government, and they're taking a lot of time to proceed. And in the meantime, there's loads and loads of projects going on, and our mountains are being taken by wind turbines at the moment, and big solar farms and solar panel farms. And the rivers are taken by dams, small dams. They're considered to be small, but they're quite big because they're one after the other.
Yeah.
And it's not only one, but many. And these are ruining the rivers and taking the water. Even the water use has been taken in this way from the local people. And there's very little objection and resistance at the moment. There are groups, activist groups that are working, but there are only few in relation to the rest of the community that is just resting and is taking a bit of money from the investors and thinking that everything will be okay because the climate will be saved in this way.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to connect two things that you said there. You said earlier, and I agree with you that because many people live in cities, they're unaware of what's happening, not in the cities, in natural places. And then you just described how in Greece and it's happening in the United States as well, there's people who do live closer to natural areas or in them in rural areas who are moving into cities. So now we have fewer people even who are out there. And that could you say that what this is doing in part is creating a kind of a vacuum in rural places and natural places and places close to natural places, a vacuum that is now of older kind of relationships that are now being replaced by these larger interests and corporate interests.
Yeah, that's exactly so. It is, and this is why it's actually happening. Because space is emptied from the more traditional uses and people as well. It's an opportunity for land grab. It gives the opportunity to come and take the land and pay very little money, because most of the land. I was listening to one of your podcasts about the Thacker Pass just a few hours ago, and you said that somebody was saying there that the land is public, and so is the case here in our area, where the land is public or owned or has been given to the municipalities to own and manage, and they pay very little money to take it, if nothing at all, of course. And it's all the areas, again, it's amazing how equivalent the whole thing is, that it's all the areas that nobody would imagine that people would come to industrialize.
Right. Right.
And in Greece, you can imagine that we have to think that industry has been very far. We're not an industrial country. We've never sort of developed very heavy industry. Industry was always concentrated near the cities, and that was it. And then there was a bit of, but not very intensive kind of industrial areas all over Greece. But a lot had to do with agricultural produce, to sort of make them some kind of other product from basic agricultural products. And there was no way that mountains would have any kind of this kind of influence. Only some extraction was taking place for particular building materials and things like that in certain areas, and that was it. I mean, what is happening now is really incredible, and people will need the land at some stage, I believe. They will need to come back and work with the land because there's no other solution. I mean, I don't know if you've come across that, but it seems to me right now that there's two main kind of routes that are being looked into. One is go back. We need to grow locally, work and produce locally. So we need to have people to do that, because all the countries that are doing it successfully, they're relying on people. And of course, if people can have also bring with them energy. Yes, if we don't have enough energy from other means, like fossil fuels are going anyway slowly, we need to remember that we are also energetic. We can bring back our work energy, and so the more we are, the better. In India, they're doing miracles just with their hands, but there are many people in a row, and they will dig a whole sort of how do you call them, swale, and to keep the water in the land and so on. And they do it just with human labor, and they collaborate, they work together. There are many. So if you don't have the people, then you cannot work. You cannot go back to the land and grow locally, work locally, produce energy locally, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the other route is that we all move into the cities and rewild everything outside, and we have the environment to among other things, to the forests to capture carbon, so it saves us from the main CO2, and produce our food within laboratories, within our houses, from synthetic materials, or even from insects. Which is crazy. It's never going to work.
Mm-mm.
Because it's the microbiome of the soil that is in full connection to the microbiome of our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So we need the substances, the rare substances and the tastes that the products give us, in order to be strong and healthy. So it's not going to work with the synthetic materials, I
No,
think. But
I'd
this
say-
is the other way,
yeah.
They say, let the countryside alone and everybody go to the cities. Have you read about this?
Yeah.
That sounds like a miserable idea. To me, like to just separate and isolate yourself so much, and simplify your food from a lab. I mean, I know we understand chemistry, but there's so much communication when you ingest something or you breathe something in. You breathe in the pollen. There's like so much communication going on. It's not an idea. It's not necessarily about thoughts, but the communication we take in from the world around us influences how we see the world and how we interact with it. And so we start isolating ourselves into little bubbles in the city. There's still the underlying misnomer that your synthetic food comes from nowhere. Like, where do we get the synthetics? We get it from a field full of soybeans or something. Like it still has a physical basis, because this whole existence is a union of physical, spiritual, all at the same time. They aren't separate things, So I like just feeling out that possible future pathway of isolating ourselves in cities and creating all of our own stuff, still with this idea that we're trying not to have an influence on anything. Well, when we've disconnected ourselves from the conversation with the rest of existence. And I think that we would find a lot more neuroses happening. I mean, I feel like we're sensing a lot of neuroses in humanity, in part because of that separation, that underlying feeling that we don't belong here sometimes, and that everything we do sucks, which is not true. We have a huge history of human existence here that wasn't like we have it today, But I think that, like, it seems like it's often thought about like what a collapse would look like, and it's like economic or environmental or whatever, but there's also the like emotional, mental part that's like just as big. To feel cut off from your world is total crazy making. It's not going to help us be able to make those things happen. We're not going to be able to keep the environment together or an economy together if we're all like really emotionally unhinged, because we have no basis for reflecting and, having the world reflect back our emotions and how our actions are affecting our reactions with nature, you know, like over here, it's interesting. Like the whole private property thing is difficult too. You know, there's a lot of public land here, and I've spent the past 10 years spending most of my time camping in remote places and public lands and following plants around. They brought me so much joy. And to know that they are, there's an ancient kinship with these plants. You can start to see how there's a human fingerprint in the wilderness, and it's beautiful. It's a part of ecology. That's just given me a lot of nourishment to know that that exists outside of this other narrative that we just suck. And we just have to mitigate the ways that we suck. Like, that's a dead end. First of all, emotionally, you know, and secondly, like in any kind of physical sense. So, but like the part about like coming back to working with land, you know, with other people, I think the other people part is important. Like I gather seeds and plant them, and that's good nourishment for me, but there's the part of the community part missing, so that we can be reflecting back with each other what we're getting from the area we're working with and what it's telling us, and, you know, what direction to go. Like, I think there's this assumption that we could have the protocol or the management practice beforehand without actually being there doing it and getting that reflection back from the responses of the land at that time and place. Like there's all that level of communication that's completely outside of a management protocol. And I've been spending a lot of my time in the management protocol writing world, and it's very circular. And a part of why it gets so stuck is that it's not being fed by presence and curiosity. We're supposed to know what to do before we even engage. And that's ridiculous. How are you supposed to know what to do unless you're there and engaged, you know?
We hadn't managed to go very far with understanding our ecology and environment and so on. In effect, in a sense that it was always the alternative thing, yeah, the alternative movement. There was this growth movement and growing and developing and so on one side with technology, and whatever else that had to do with nature and ecology was considered something that a minority would be interested in, and it was always the sort of the alternatives. They call us here ecologists, and it's like a swear word, you know, that you're an ecologist. That's why you don't want the road to go through the forest and so on. Mm-hmm. Ecologist. Mm-hmm. And then things were going better, at least in Europe and in Greece. There was a very, very, very interesting law in 1986, just before we actually applied many other regulations that were part of our European community commitments. And then Europe was also our hope for us ecologists. We were always turning to the European legislation that had, you know, was supposed to be the developed kind of environmental education and legislation there that had led to a better environmental management and so on. And so Greece was behind, and we were looking up at towards Europe to deal with our environmental problems in Greece. We were happy that we were within the European community so as to be sort of committed towards a better environmental set of regulations in Greece. And implementation, of course, which was another difficult. It's always difficult to implement the laws, of course, also. So, and then just before we were able to say that we are now near the top of the hill, we're doing better environmentally, suddenly all this craze with green energy comes and sort of turns everything away. Even our Supreme Court, you know, the Supreme Court mm-hmm. Has changed its decision policy. it's not so environmentally friendly anymore. We cannot rely on the Supreme Court to sort of protect the environment as it used to in the 80s and 90s. Because now green energy is the future, is what will save the future of humanity, and it will deal with the climate. So as it deals with the climate, anything that, if you say, for example, I want to protect the bears that live in that forest or whatever, in these mountain ranges, they will tell you that yes, but sort of green infrastructure on these mountains is for the good of the bears and the rest of the ecosystems, because it will save the climate. And the climate is the major threat right now for all the ecosystems and biodiversity. So, it's for their own good. So it's we will not rule against this development there. And it's very difficult. You have to sort of play with the regulations and everything in order to stop projects that are being developed all around our area. I mean, if I could show you a map, you would be really surprised to see what is going on right now. Yeah. And if I don't know how you want us to continue with this, but I could tell you a bit more about our findings of our study and what is not very much appreciated by the Ministry of Environment, because we are doing this study for the Ministry of Environment. If you have understood when I mentioned it before, it's this project has been given to a set of 10 or 11 offices around Greece as part of by the Ministry of the Environment. The Ministry of the Environment is responsible to actually implement this project, which will lead to the presidential decrees. The Minister of the Environment will sign first the proposed decree, the decree plan, and then this will become stamped by the president of the country. So they are so much pro green infrastructure right now. It's a craze. It's like I heard of this about Thacker Pass as well, and other similar projects. You have to take your time and investigate and research and take everything, all the pluses and minuses into account. Right now, it's so crazy and it's going so fast forward that they don't stop to think at all, to consider the implications. And of course, the environmental impact assessments are done here in Greece. They're not independent. I'm wondering whether that is so in the States, but here, the investor is actually doing the impact assessment. He's hiring an expert company that will do a very good job to deal with all the details. But most of these impact assessments for all these projects are actually copy-paste. If you open one, you've read them all. Sometimes they forget to change the names of the places. You find strange names. You might see Thacker Pass for a project that has to do with Massachusetts or something.
Yeah, like here, the other site I've been going to, that's the next big one they want to develop. Right now we're waiting for the environmental impact statement to come out. But I was thinking about it the other day, where it's like, they've been out there, the company's been out there since 2017, and nobody really knew they were out there. So just in the past year or two, the local tribal folks start to understand it's there. Other people, advocates, start to understand, but it's already the process is already so far. All those relationships between the company and the agencies has already been made years ago, right? And so it was occurring to me the other day that it's so ridiculous that an environmental impact statement is done after they've already been out there doing exploratory drilling, and they already presented the next phase of exploratory drilling and then do the environmental impact statement. So you already have that plan in mind while you're doing the environmental assessment. And I think that in some ways, it doesn't even matter if you're an advocate or an advocate for or against the mine. The fact that that proposal for the project is already there, it's kind of like it has an influence on you still, Like a part
Exactly.
of you, if you're an advocate against, already like feels a little defeated already, or flustered or angry or anxious. And if you're for it, you're like, oh, well, yeah, we already got the plan, so we should move ahead with the plan, you know?
It's exactly so. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a
Yeah.
disservice to everybody to have it in there already. Like a part of another thing I was thinking about in my time out there is this idea of pristine land that gets in the way too. Like I've heard it used by you know, my comrades and advocates, and then I also hear it used by the company, you know. And it's like in our bodies and in our minds, what that word does is that it's already not pristine. Is there's some part that already feels that it's not sacred or not worth protecting because it's not this pristine thing. And I know that when we're using that as advocates for a place, we're not meaning it that way, but it's still a troublesome thing. It gets used all the time to be like, oh, it's already not pristine land. It's already been impacted. So it can't, you know, now you have to prove why you should save it because it's already not pristine. So you really got to come up with something good now, you know? You got to come up with some rare species, something we never seen before. Like, you know, it's just kind of a nightmare of like argument, you know, and still missing the point, you know.
Do you find that your constitution is being your constitution laws are broken by new legislation to help these developments go on? Do they sort of amend the laws and regulations in order for them to be able to be applied, all these investments? Because that happens here in Greece also. It's a matter of having the money and the patience to take these laws, the Greek state laws, to court. We have a particular article in our constitution that says that whenever if you have a threatened species lives within an area, then that area is a habitat that needs to be protected from any kind of development that may affect its life and survival and so on, its dignity in a way. And the new laws that have been applied in recent years, in the last 3 or 4 years, to sort of comply with this craziness of development in the countryside of all these mega projects, industrial green energy projects, has done away with this law. And it does. For example, we have proposed that there must be buffer zones and ecological corridors, which are very, very important. Other than the fact that the Natura sites are not horizontally protected from these kind of developments, you need to sort of prove and do a lot of conservation work in order to designate land uses, and they will be fought against by all the developers, of course, who are very influential, as you may imagine. But also areas outside the Natura sites that I was saying before should be buffer zones and ecological corridors, if the species are there, the strictly protected species, like the brown bear in Greece is a strictly protected species, and it has a habitat that covers all the area around the sort of the space that we study. We have brought evidence forward to demonstrate this with extremely profound scientists of the very special scientists that study wolves and bears and the large carnivores sort of thing, and they have produced mathematical models to predict the impacts and everything, and it's all there, and it's all very, very nicely documented. And we have been halted from actually going towards the end of our work because it's against the current government policy. They don't want to, and it's like where you have because of course it's not just these species, the pelicans or the big birds of prey that fly over certain areas and so on, or other species that are flag species, as we say. But the bear is here because we have a decent ecosystem. We have water, we have soils that are healthy, we have forests and all this kind of thing. You know, one influences the other. It's a proper ecosystem. It's a healthy ecosystem. And there you have a bear, which has very, very strict requirements as to what it needs in order to be in an area. And this area here in northern Greece has these species and others. And we have proved that they will be very badly affected by this kind of development of infrastructure. And even so, they are sort of pressing us to exclude certain areas from our proposals, saying that they're too large, they're too big, we need to develop, we need to, you know, what will we do if we... And at the same time that we're doing our work, they are carrying on with their projects, as you said, using older impact assessments and environmental regulations that were for different projects, but now they need to just be updated with one note from the governor or whatever, and we can fast forward again to gain time. And the problem that we also have here is that they are going really fast. They're going so fast that they're overshooting. In what respect? They cannot use the energy that they're producing. There's not enough network. There's not enough of the other infrastructure. So what they're doing now in Greece is they're asking the existing infrastructure, green infrastructure, to sort of produce less, or to stop producing certain days of do something to stop anyway producing electricity, so that new investors join the group. Isn't that crazy? What kind of land planning is that?
It's reminding me, like, I don't know, the late 1990s, early 2000s, there was this whole ecology conversation of understanding fragmentation. You know, that was a more popular conversation back then. I don't hear it mentioned so much anymore, but it seemed like we were kind of coming back to an understanding of, oh, you know, habitat isn't this one little square. You know, it's a range of different connected mosaic of a landscape that like blends so that there can be movement between it, you know, and it's like, yeah, that one kind of got thrown out the window with an idea of habitat being a box thing, or you can destroy this one, but mitigate for keeping that little patch of sagebrush over there. And so that's the same thing. And it's like, I don't know, we forgot about the fragmentation part. And we also forgot that like a habitat is a home. It's like not this idea that's out there, you know, like, oh, if we cut all this down, a lot of it'll regrow in 10 years. So the animals will have better food then. And it's like, yeah, that's 10 years from now. They'll be starved or moved on or dead. Like, you know, if someone came and took out all of our food and we were like, oh, in 10 years, we'll give you a better food or whatever, we wouldn't make it, you know? So it's like trying to bring that back to like a like common understanding part of like, you get used to knowing where to find things in your world and where to go. And it's the same for the animals and wildlife. Like I've been working with bear corridor stuff up here too in the Sierras. And I have a friend who's a really awesome bear tracker and wildlife biologist. And we were talking all about ancestral trails, you know, that animals have trails they've used for generations. They pass that down, you know. And I was reading about it being the same for bighorn sheep. There's a lot of those out where I was in the caldera. And that, you know, when they get relocated, they often are not very good foragers if they don't get adopted by the other sheep there, because it was the elder sheep that showed them, you know, seasonally where the best forage was. And their movements are different if you relocate them. They're a little more like, they don't quite know, you know. It's not just about wandering up and finding something. Like there's all these other relationships it's not just about opportunism, you know. Exactly.
Very nice. Yes, very nice.
Yeah.
So many things that we don't understand. Yeah, it's crazy. And fragmentation is very important, very important. People people don't know. People have not read. They have not informed themselves. This is a big problem, education, I think.
Mhm.
We need to be educated better. How does one find information? What is it? What is it? Chance? Is it sometimes? But sometimes, we need to organize that as well, starting
Mhm.
from schools. But of
Yeah.
course, then we need the teachers to be to have the knowledge. Yes, all the things you say, Nikki. Are there many teachers that know, and is there a curriculum that is based on this kind of knowledge, and it's spread to the young people, the new generations? I mean, the new generations, they need to know that things are not as they found them. It was only 230, 300 years maximum that this
Mhm.
kind of lifestyle prevailed. It's only a small fraction of time, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you consider the planet's life,
Yeah.
it's nothing. And we think that this is it, nothing else. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's the three young people I took out with me. A part of it was a mentorship kind of space, because I would keep meeting these really enthusiastic young people in their 20s. Like maybe they went to college for a bit and they got into the conservation field, and I just, like, in talking with them, would find myself getting so mad on their behalf, because I could tell that they were feeling conflicted, and the things they would start to tell me about conservation or ecology, I already knew what they were going to say before they said it, because I've heard it before and it's not theirs. And I could tell that they, like, weren't into some of these things, but they were just being told over and over again that we got to figure it out. This is how conservation works, and so this is what you're supposed to do. A lot of it was around, herbicides. Young people would come in, like, not feeling cool about herbicides as a poison, and then get into the field and being told that this is the solution. This is how you do it. And I would get so mad on their behalf, in part because that was my experience. And that's why I got out of the field of restoration. I couldn't quite resolve that part in myself. So I think that there is so much more needed in just, like, creating different opportunities for young people who are, like, so enthusiastic. They've come into the world in this time and place when there's, like, all kinds of collapse going on around them. They are, like, they need to be given room to keep that, like, spark and that, like, intuition, and to be given permission and encouragement to be like, I want to hear what solutions you come up with from a place that wants to be connected. Like, that was in taking those folks out there, we wanted to have a connection experience. Like, what is it to be a part of your ecology? How do we have different conversations if we're not feeling outside of it? That we just have to mitigate for sucking. Like, there has to be another way. And there's, like, so much youthful enthusiasm just from being young and fresh, and it's like they need more space to just be, like, supported in a way that isn't just trying to say, like, these are the answers, these are what we got to do, from adults or teachers being anxious and afraid of what's going on and scrambling for the answer. Like, oh, we have the solution, this is what we got to do. Oh, it's carbon stuff. Oh, it's like, I think there's probably a lot more of that going on, where young people are being handed these, like, supposed answers and told that this is what it is, and we know because we're adults and we've been looking at this for 30 years, when it's like, no, but you might be stuck, because you've been looking for an answer for 30 years. So you need to, like, create space to be like, actually, we don't have a good answer. This is what we've been trying so far, but we're not sure that it is the answer. How about starting there with the young people, So yeah, so I think there needs to be a lot more holding space like that, to be like, to admit that we don't know what we're doing, that this isn't an answer. These things we've come up with are not answers. I've really found it inspiring to hang out with the young people. That's the thing that gets me most motivated most quickly lately, and mostly in a way of, like, I just want to give you a little more space and see what you come up with too, and let me share all the things I've been seeing, but let me share, like, ways of you approaching that so that you can tell me what you see. Like, I don't want you just see what I see. but here's how you start to just like be curious about your world and what are the effects of different ways of relating? Like, what actually are they? You know?
I think that to education, I would add the importance of media
Yeah.
too, because a lot of people, it's there are narratives that get created by the media, intentionally and unintentionally or unconsciously, you know, and the media and the narratives that we're hearing around, you know, green energy right now, a lot of that messaging is coming from corporate interests, you know. When we do then run across a fact, we're interpreting it through the view of that lens, you know, and of the story that we're being told, of the narrative that we're hearing, you know. And so that's a challenge too. And I don't know how different that is in Greece as compared to the United States, but in the United States, 90% of the media is owned by 5 corporations, and those 5 corporations have interlocking boards of directors with, you know, defense companies, with energy companies, with big ag, you know. And so it's not even necessarily a case of the ownership telling individual journalists, say this and don't say that. It's more of this culture that gets created by the fact that those are the interests that are, you know, you're only going to make it in media, in the corporate media, if you have a certain kind of outlook and you have a certain kind of message. You know, if you have a different kind of outlook, you're not going to be absorbed by that system. You know, it's gonna push you out. You know, or you're gonna become frustrated and leave. Or, you know, I mean, there's so I think that the media, that's part of the struggle or whatever, in terms of all this, is to how to respond to and those narratives, and I guess it's by producing alternative narratives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's similar here. No, perhaps I should say it's the same. We've learned from you, I think. It's happening more and more in recent years. That's why I've said I say we've learned. Yes, it's the percentage is about right. The corporate media, and of course they control everything that like the television. It's crazy. It's almost all media are on the same kind of track, and they reproduce the same kind of narratives. Yes, and that's a big problem here in Greece right now. You know, there was this parenthesis, in a way, this small period of a left-wing party that came into power
I heard about
in
that.
2015,
Mm-hmm.
giving a lot of hope to the sort of for social justice and so on, that was lagging behind, especially during and after the crisis, the economic crisis of Europe, and I think internationally there was a crisis at the time, the end of 2009, 2010, beginning there. It was getting really dramatic in Greece, and there was this left-wing government that was formed, and they went against the sort of very, very strongly against the German and European policies that were really destroying the economy of Athens in Greece. And but that lasted only a few months. They were persuaded to switch their narratives, the Greek government, and they became a sort of they let in many changes to their policies, and in effect became very quickly in the eyes of the people became a sort of an equivalent to a right-wing policy. So now the right wing came back, which has always been. Greece has had mostly right-wing governments or socialist governments that were a bit corrupted and didn't produce the goods. It was all about the money. Take money from where? Nobody knew. So there was a crisis, this sort of thing. And so we now have a very, very strongly set government, which is neoliberal. Is that the correct?
Yep, that's it.
Expression? And it's strongly pushing towards privatization of everything, even water, education, and so on. And it's controlling all the media. And this is really, as you said just before, bringing things to a very, very tight sort of condition, very difficult situation. Because it's very difficult for the truth to come out and inform people. People are scared and are not participating. The movements are generally very low profile these days in Greece. People are not even going to vote. Voting in Greece was once upon a time a very big thing, and now only 40 to 50% of the population is voting, which is of the existing population, yes, is voting for in the elections, and that is a dramatic sort of decline, very bad. So yes, the media are ruling. The media rule. And if we're talking about climate, if you object to the main narrative, you become immediately a fossil fuel advocate and
Right. Yeah.
a climate denier and so on.
Yeah.
Even if you say right from the start that I believe that we have a problem with the climate, we have a big climate crisis, and we must do something about it. But if you say that it may not be our priority to do something about CO2, if we cannot actually do anything as it appears, because nothing has changed. We have 28 COPs, and it hasn't been going really anywhere forward as far as fossil fuel is concerned. Also, we're having wars still for fossil fuels, and so let's try other things. But the other things are not liked by the politicians. And as a very dear, he's sort of a very dear friend. Not exactly. I haven't met him either. But he's Walter Jena. I don't know if you've come across him at all.
Name's familiar.
He's an amazing guy from Australia. As he says in one of his presentations, politicians have only a 4 or 5 or some this kind of year period to think about and be sort of worried and design policies, because that's how much they will be around. That's how far they predict that they will be around. Whereas what we need is a much longer term, and we should, as communities, try and work, communities work and do things on the ground. And as he says, anything matters, even if you have pots of plants in your balcony, whatever you do to conserve water and soil and ecosystems matters as to what happens to our climate. So, and this kind of narrative is not catching. Yeah. There is a lot of progress, though. I think I've become more optimistic, because there are more and more. This kind of thing is part of the discussion. This land use and vegetation and forests matter and trees matter. I like the title of your series very much. It's very interesting. That's how I first came to meet you on the internet.
Yeah, in our first email exchange, we talked briefly about some of these subjects and about how the green energy development is an environmental threat in different ways, and how there needs to be a pushback against that. And you said, yes, it's something along the lines of, yes, it's a challenge, but we shall persevere. You said we shall persevere. And I really appreciated hearing that, because living in the United States, this is an empire in decline, and sort of the mood is just sort of one of cynicism about everything, because there's this feeling of energy sort of going down the drain, of things are falling apart, things are in decline. And so a message like we shall persevere is not something that you really hear people say here, and it's not something that is felt here so much. And so I just was hoping you could talk about that for a moment.
Okay. Yes. Well, one thing is that when you learn more about what is really happening and what is the reality, in a way, what it all points down to is that we must look at nature, and we shall persevere also may refer to the fact that nature will find its way one way or the other.
Right.
It may be that another civilization, as has happened in the past, will disappear, will be lost. And this will be on a global scale, perhaps, this time. Life on Earth is such a wonderful, it's such a majestic kind of thing, isn't it? The way that life came upon the land from the sea, and what little forces and major forces were involved, and how fungi that we feel so strongly against. If most of the people, when they hear the word fungus, they think that it's something that will threaten them, whereas it's what gave life to this planet, and it's what can regenerate the lost parts of our planet as well. But they have certain demands, certain needs, these organisms, and if they find them, they will flourish. So in a way, when I wrote you this, it had to do with the fact that I believe that life is not just us. Life is everything. So I'm optimistic that we will find the route. We'll find the way, because again, nature is the truth, isn't it? It's if you look at nature, there's no denying it, that there are certain things that you need that are necessary. Nature is the kind of complete law of life. It gives you the laws of life, how things function and work. Because we may have different opinions, but if we look at nature, we find the truth. That's what I think. That's all there.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify. Sometimes, because in order to address the environmental crises, the different environmental crises that we're causing on the planet collectively, including changes to the climate, to address those, there's changes that need to happen in our lifestyle. And I'm not talking about individual choices. I'm talking about systemic changes that have to happen, which would involve policy and all sorts of things at that level. But because some people don't like the idea of any kind of change at all, they will fall back on, oh, well, eventually the Earth will be okay on its own, as an excuse not to do anything or not to address any of the damage that we've made. But I just wanted to clarify that that's not what you're saying when you say that.
Yes, absolutely. No. Of course. I believe that we have the capacity, we have the agency to do things differently. After all, humans are a keystone species, yes?
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is that we were so influential to the community of the ecosystems but we have done everything wrong. We've been doing it the wrong way for many, many years, for thousands of years. Yeah. We've made mistakes that have brought upon us many sort of difficulties that we have actually inherited. I don't know if you've read this excellent research paper that claims that the Sahara is a man-made. It's the result of man-made of human activity, and not necessarily only this axis thing that was the prevailing kind of narrative about the Sahara formation. There's this nice work by an archaeologist, actually, who found that it was due to human activity back in the almost, I'm not sure about the numbers, but perhaps 10,000 to 8,000 years ago.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So if this is true, which seems to be very well documented and explored, you see, we have changed so much, and that's what may make us a bit more happy and optimistic. The fact that we have such power, if we decide to change the way things are going, we are completely able to do it. As Walter Jenner says, he uses the word nicely. He says, we are responsible from the word responsibility,
Nice. Mm-hmm.
We are able to respond. So let's respond. Let's do it. What he proposes to be done, he says that if we actually start working on all the proposals, within 10 years, things will be completely different. But we need to start doing it, because if we don't, we're very close to the edge, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's all these very extreme events, the tipping points that may come, and one more, and then another, and so on. And some people claim that we're really on a very thin rope, that it may crack from any time from a tipping point event. And but this brings fear and pessimism. We shouldn't be like that. We should look at the optimistic view, that we are able to change, to inflict major changes and change the way that things are going as humans. And of course, this is a fantastic idea. It's to be a keystone species. We love keystone species, don't we? Well, we are one of them, like the beavers and the wolves and the others.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's really enjoyable to meet you and to just hear you speak, and it's just really helpful to talk to kindred spirits. Sometimes it feels sometimes I have been finding it hard to continue trying to speak to things because I feel like it maybe doesn't matter, or something. So I get reciprocal nourishment just from talking to other people. Like it's a real nourishment that helps continue to want to look and to say things, So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was you've said it exactly as I would. I mean, the nourishment part of it. That was the idea. That's how I reached out for Colibri, because I feel that it's very nice to be able to share these things and talk about it, the whole thing, and increase our numbers and our thoughts, and enhance our thoughts, and exchange also the different mentalities around the world. Because the exciting thing is that we talk and talk here in Greece, and are active, but it's nice to do it from the other side of the Atlantic, yeah, to be able to communicate with somebody so far away.
Yeah.
That makes it even more interesting and exciting and soothing in a way, to know that it's a worldwide thing, and share it live.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Nikos.
Well, thank you very much. It's a privilege to have done this nice conversation. Really, really, I enjoy it very much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Speaking for the Trees, no matter where they're from, is also a blog at colibri.substack.com. That's KOLLIBRI.substack.com. Paid subscribers get exclusive blog posts and early access to podcast episodes. Intro beats by Big Joe Drummer. This outro music by Codebox. Join us again for another episode of Speaking for the Trees, no matter where they're from, the podcast.
Earlier, in the discussion there was someone behind you there, the black kitty that was back there.
Ah, I think it was sort of black in the shade. It must have been. We have 6 kitties.
Oh,
6
6.
cats.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They've all been sort of taken in from some sorrow home. They were abandoned, or sort of they were stray cats anyway.
Right.
And I think it was Tiger, the one that found, because I saw with my the figure. I think it was, his name is Tiger.
Uh-huh. Wonderful.
The tiger, and we have the Euphrates as well. The 2 brothers.
Oh, Tigris. Tigris like the river.
Tiger, yes, exactly. Tigris,
Okay.
Tigris, yes.
Okay.
Is that how you pronounce the river?
Yeah,
Tigris.
the Tigris, Tigris.
Right.
Tigris.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's the Greek. I said it in English.
Right.
It's also Tigris in Greek.
Okay.
Tigris is
Yeah.
in Greek.